So we have this evening, 3, I want to say co-op-sex and a general counsel as well. Is it all attorneys as well? Oh dear. Okay, good. Thank God. I don't mean to sound like that, but great. So we have with us Simone Pearson from Jamaica, am I correct? Yes. And we have Kathryna from Trinidad and Tobago, and we have, I want to make sure I pronounce the name correct, Charissa. Very nice. So each of you in your own way, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and talk about your own experiences. And I don't want to assume that we all know what VUCA means. So I'm just going to say it here, and you all who don't know, I know you ladies know, but the ones who don't know could Google it while we're talking. So VUCA is something that came out of the US Army after 9/11, and it really speaks about the volatility, the uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity in the world. And we could all appreciate that, especially in a post-COVID world. Okay, so that's basically it. And I'm going to start off, and I'm going to ask Charissa to introduce herself and to speak about her own challenges that she's faced in her VUCA world.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Kamala and CCGI for having me back as a panelist. The sessions today have been very, very insightful, and I certainly hope we can keep your attention for this last session. So thank you for having us here. For me as a corporate secretary, and recently having taken on ESG responsibilities as well, VUCA thinking is really about developing my ability to anticipate and adapt to changes quickly, to think strategically, and to develop creative solutions, to think beyond the boundaries of my organization and consider the broader context in which decisions by the board and management are made. There are a few key elements I would like to raise today based on my experience. One, as corporate secretaries, we should recognize that change is inevitable, we know that, and adaptability is key to our success. This means being proactive rather than reactive, anticipating trends and developments and staying ahead of the curve. It is essential that we embrace a learning and improvement mindset, continuous learning and improvement. That includes new technologies and innovation. And this is what can position us as influencers, advisors, and yes, even as leaders in our organization and our industry. The second item I'd like to highlight is once we have this knowledge, one of the most important components of our success as a corporate secretary, as has been mentioned several times today, is building strong partnerships and networks with our chair, with management, within our organization, and across the industry as well. I cannot overemphasize how important it is to develop a relationship with your chair or even a board member or a management board member to start with, because this is key in the evolution from being perceived as an administrator to a trusted governance advisor, and to be able to influence in a proactive way the agenda, director education topics, board assessment tools, and even the composition of the board by, for example, implementing a skills matrix, which will inform what skills are required when filling a vacancy. The third item, very important to incorporate what we would call the VUCA items on a board agenda. How do we do that? By taking a forward-thinking approach, by influencing your chair, discussing with your chair to dedicate specific agenda items that can lead to open discussions, strategic thinking. That's how I, as a secretary, can support the board and management in effectively addressing challenges and leveraging opportunities presented by this ever-changing environment. In terms of the board agenda, what that can look like, I'd like to end with that. There are a few board agenda items that we've included, some more recently than others, which have really helped. One is ESG. We all talk about ESG all the time, right? But ESG should be a standard agenda item if you can get it on the agenda. This can include an analysis of emerging trends, regulatory developments, relevant internal and external influences. The board, by regularly reviewing the ever-changing ESG landscape, can stay informed, and management can adapt its strategies accordingly. Another one would be scenario planning session. Think of a cyber attack simulation, for example. This would explore various potential future scenarios, potential impact on the organization, and it will encourage your board members to think creatively and critically about how different factors could unfold and how this can impact your organization's strategic objectives. And this exercise can also help the board anticipate the challenges and management develop contingency plans to mitigate risks and seize opportunities. I will briefly mention risk management because while in the financial industry where I am in, that is a standard agenda item, it may not be in every industry. So risk management should already be a standard agenda item, but it's even more important with the VUCA challenges. The board or the committee should review the organization's risk appetite, risk management framework, we already know that, but they should also assess emerging risks, evaluate the potential impact, discuss risk mitigating strategies. The board should also monitor key risk indicators and receive regular updates on risk management initiatives. Strategic planning is so important to have that on the agenda. We have that annually. Some board members have that quarterly. Some boards have that quarterly. This VUCA environment, it requires agility. It requires flexibility in your strategic planning, and the board should devote time for strategic discussions that consider the evolving landscape and evaluate the organization's strategic initiatives vis-a-vis new challenges and opportunities. Innovation and technology, I won't spend a lot of time on that. That's obviously important in the VUCA environments. And the last two, one is talent management and development, requires a skilled and adaptable workforce. And the board should talk about talent management to ensure that the organization has the right people with the right capabilities. The last one is one of the most important ones, I think, where we as corporate secretary can influence the board, is board education and development. The board should acknowledge the importance of continuous learning. As secretaries, we have the opportunity to influence that. That's part of our job. We research what happens, board developments. So we have the opportunity to influence that. So you should actually allocate time on the agenda for board education and development sessions that focus on emerging trends, industry insights, best practices, and that encourages board members to stay up to date and to share their learnings with other board members. I think those are, for me, the most important factors that help me in influencing in a proactive way my board, the agenda of the board, director education topics, board assessment, and even the composition of the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I took notes, so we'll be circling back to some of my questions after. I'm a good student. But for now, I want to also point out, so Curacao, she's in Curacao, Simone Pearson is in Jamaica, and Kathryna, you're in Trinidad, yeah? So I'm gonna ask Kathryna to go next, followed by Simone. And like I said, just state your industry, just for clarity, because I know Curacao spoke about being in the finance sector, correct? And of course, your bios are in the profile, but I think that's also important for us to indicate, because when we talk about the challenges, different sectors have different challenges, right? And there may be some things in common. So Kathryna, I'm gonna ask you to go next and tell us what your challenges are and what you think some of the solutions may be, if you approach it like that.
Sure, thank you, Simone, and thank you to Kamala and the CCGI for having me on this panel. Of course, great, tremendous work by CCGI on this very important topic today and this week. So just a little bit about me. I am Kathryna. I am 26 years old to the bar. I've been a corporate secretary for the past 18 years. I moved around a little bit, 2 state organizations, National Petroleum Marketing Company, as well as the Electricity Commission in Trinidad, as well as 2 publicly listed companies. Prior to Angostura, where I am now, I was at the Trinidad Cement Limited Group, which operated in Jamaica, Guyana, and Barbados. And of course, now I'm at Angostura, which is also a publicly listed company. So that is we are in the manufacturing sector, but also listed and regulated, highly regulated. Okay, so the concept of VUCA, I must say, when Kamala raised this topic, I did have to resort to Google and do some research. Once I got my head wrapped around it. I said, this is not a new topic. But of course, the acronym was a bit new for us. And as you know, as Simone explained, it's about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity in the world today. It originated after the Cold War between the US and the USSR, as coined by the American War College. However, we no doubt live in a VUCA world today. It has recently been highlighted and accentuated for me in 2020 with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, a word that I used merely in my force majeure clauses before an actual pandemic hit us. And we had to grapple with, the VUCA environment caused by that circumstance. Prior to that, I think in terms of world events, we had the global financial crisis in 2008 as the other major world events that could have precipitated a VUCA environment. In my career as a CorpSec, apart from the recent pandemic, I would have to say I encountered a VUCA circumstance or environment that was precipitated by an unprecedented legal action in which a group of majority shareholders removed an entire board of directors in August 2014. We could talk about that a little more later. So the challenges faced by corporate secretaries in a VUCA world, to me, are very much similar to those faced generally by leaders in companies. So general leadership challenges. For corporate secretaries in particular, I would say I identified 4 main challenges. And of course, we can discuss further as the panel develops. Number 1 for me was managing stakeholder relationships. So when lockdown measures implemented by the government of Trinidad and Tobago due to the COVID-19 pandemic came about, it could not be business as usual for corporate secretaries. It was not possible to meet in person. Many of the company's bylaws simply provided for in-person annual meetings. Accordingly, many corporate secretaries found themselves having to review and amend their bylaws to allow for virtual hybrid annual meetings, which of course are a statutory requirement. At Angostura during the pandemic, we had 1 in-person meeting during the pandemic and 1, of course, we used social distancing for that, and then 1 fully virtual meeting after we changed our bylaws, and that was a resounding success. And we are now in the process of seeking to amend our bylaws to provide for routine virtual or hybrid board meetings. We sought to leverage the legislation in Trinidad to use virtual distribution of shareholder documents such as annual reports, notices of annual meetings, proxy forms, management proxy circulars, etc., to mitigate against institutional voids in the postal service. This is during the pandemic. And of course, we use it now because, out of that challenge came, to me, efficiencies. So we leverage technology to ensure that we were able to meet statutory requirements in an efficient manner. So there was also greater use of technology and software to treat with regulatory filings. So communicating with key stakeholders about the rapid changes in stakeholder interactions was key. Now, corporate secretary's responsibility in managing stakeholder relations has taken on a more complex role in recent years, and more so now having regard to the added emphasis on ESG. The corporate secretary, as a governance professional, wears many hats, as we discussed today. We are no longer minute takers. We are gatekeepers, advisors, liaisons, mediators, PR advocates, depending on your portfolio. And as I like to say, we are the conscience of the company. And in anticipation of regulations in Trinidad and Tobago in relation to ESG reporting, and given the requirements already in place globally, corporate secretaries as the consciences of the company would be well advised to partner with the CEO and the board to ensure that the company's ESG strategy and framework for reporting, as well as the circular economy, are placed on the board agenda and actively articulated in a meaningful way. All right, today we spoke about greenwashing and ticking boxes and so on, but as corporate secretaries, we have to ensure that it's placed on the agenda in a meaningful way and so articulated. The pandemic forced us as corporate secretaries to focus on business continuity and risk management. Previously, the corporate secretary relied heavily on precedent and form. However, The quick changes that faced us from 2020 and beyond require skillful risk management and analysis and business continuity planning, not only in the core business areas, which we did before, but also in the corporate secretariat. So that was new and challenging, but also led to efficiencies which we will use and leverage going forward. The second challenge, cybersecurity issues and information document management, which I think Charissa touched on. With the increased use and reliance on technology, there's obviously a risk of systems being hacked and servers failing, amongst other cybersecurity issues. To circumvent this, notwithstanding various document management software solutions that have been implemented, the corporate secretary must maintain a paper trail and hard copies of critical documents or external hard drive as a backup for crucial documents such as board meeting minutes, board packages, statutory filings, etc. And to further mitigate the impact of cybersecurity risks, it's advisable for corporate secretaries to arrange training for directors and executives as well as other team members. The third challenge, from my perspective, is reputational risk and litigation risk. As corporate secretaries, we do all we can, and some of us are general counsel as well, to protect our companies against suits, fines, and sanctions. And in a VUCA environment, litigation risk and reputational risk increase. We had to review our contractual arrangements proactively and sometimes revise to take into account the impact of the pandemic on meeting contractual terms with suppliers, service providers, and customers in order to try to protect the company against suit. And some of us as corporate secretaries have a role in assisting the chairman and the board in managing public relations. So that became critical given the increased reputational risk during COVID and just generally in a VUCA environment. And fourth challenge, talent, engagement, and retention. I think Chris also touched on this, but I'm speaking about it from the perspective of a corporate secretary and the corporate secretary's team. For me, one of the major challenges in a VUCA world is keeping your team engaged and retaining talent. Working through COVID-19 restrictions meant trying to keep the team focused, satisfied, and productive by virtual means, which is no easy task. That meant for us daily teams or Zoom meetings, check-ins during the day, rules of engagement agreed upon by the entire team. And keeping team members, more so new members, engaged was more of a challenge. So we had to find creative methods to ensure that coaching and mentoring and development remained a priority, albeit by virtual means. So how do we survive in a VUCA world as corporate secretaries? VUCA is not going anywhere. I don't think, especially after COVID. So how do we counter VUCA conditions? In my research, I came across a very clever acronym, TIME, which is an antithesis to VUCA, a concept coined by Bob Johansson, author of Get There E. And this acronym seeks vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. So where there's volatility, you need to have vision. You need to get visionary leader, outline strategic vision for your team, for your company. Where there's uncertainty, you need to have understanding, keeping up to date with the latest developments in the world, but you have a clear understanding of the landscape. And then where there's complexity, you need clarity, understanding stakeholder needs by means of being proactive and not reactive. Anticipating ESG reporting regulations, advancing the circular economy, ESG on the board agenda if not already done. And where there's ambiguity, you need to be agile. So risk management and business continuity planning, developing contingency plans so as to be in a position to respond to changing requirements of volatile or complex systems is crucial. So I think I've taken up a lot of time. So I think those are my opening remarks. Simone?
Thank you. And I'm going to give right over to the other Simone. Go take it away.
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say a big thank you to Kamla and the CCGI. It's such a pleasure to be here and also to serve on such a distinguished panel with my fellow soldiers out there in the world trying to help with governance. It's a very difficult time to do that. but it's a real pleasure to be here and also to have the opportunity to share with, you know, such distinguished ladies in the field. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but before I do that, I'm very relieved that Kathryna went before me in saying that I thought I'd be the first one to admit that I had no idea what VUCA was, and I had to quickly pivot to figuring out. I had to quickly go on Google before answering Kamla, because I wasn't sure if I was actually qualified to speak on the topic because I had no idea what she was talking about. So I was very relieved. And in fact, when I read the definition of what the acronym actually stands for, my first question was, are we talking about the role of corporate secretary, or are we talking about the world? Because this is a VUCA job, right? It's a very VUCA field to be in. And when you layer on top of that the world is also VUCA, like I said, it's a pleasure to be sitting here with my fellow soldiers out in the regulatory environment. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am currently General Counsel and Corporate Secretary at Pan Jamaica Group. And speaking of VUCA, I'm in the middle of a pretty unstable world, which is quite specific to us, because we have just completed an amalgamation of two very large Jamaican-owned multinationals, right? That have international businesses all over the world in 4 different segments: financial services, shipping and logistics, specialty food and drink, and what we coin as global services, which really just means, you know, BPO, logistics services, infrastructure. It's kind of a catch-all. So we touch a lot of different industries, and we were 2 very long-standing, fairly iconic Jamaican-owned multinationals, right? One existing for over 90 years on the stock exchange, and the other one for about 60. So we've been around for a long time. We're very well known in the Jamaican landscape, and we did the unthinkable thing of deciding to get married, combine everything, and it's literally like the Brady Bunch now, where we're all trying to live together and manage all these complex businesses and all the regulatory challenges that come along with it, right? So I'm living in a VUCA world and also having a VUCA job. So I wanted to say that, first of all, that, you know, I think I always like to start, I guess, with the fact that the role of corporate secretary has evolved so much. And I think both panelists spoke to this before. You know, it started off as a fairly simple and safe environment where all you really had to do was take minutes and maybe keep a company register. And now, unfortunately, you're tasked with, I want to say, the near impossible of wearing every hat that is possibly known to mankind. Maybe it should be replaced with a hard hat. But you literally wear all these hats. You are the conscience of the board. You're expected to be a business partner as well as regulator. You're expected to partner with the businesses, but also slap them on the wrist for when they do things that they ought not to do, or to keep them from doing things that you need to save them from themselves somehow, right? So also to be the bridge between management and the board. So, you know, while corporate secretaries don't necessarily lead an organization, you're not at the forefront of it, we are everything that comprises the background, everything that comprises the structure, the bones, the spinal cord that holds the whole thing together. We are the glue. And I think once we acknowledge the fact that the role requires that of us, we can just imagine what level of complexity we have to handle on a day-to-day basis, because whatever challenges are affecting that business, we directly absorb those things, because we are expected to somehow pilot the business, the board, and the management team through whatever's going on in the world, be it a pandemic, whether it is AI, whatever it is. We have to retool ourselves and think about how do we help our businesses to continue in these unstable environments, right? So, I mean, I guess I would say that for me, they're very, you know, if I think about what's most challenging to me now, they're, other than things that have been very well said by both Kathryna and Charissa, which I think, you know, there are many things that are common to every business. We're all coming out of COVID. We all know what that was like. If there was, I mean, I said to somebody the other day, I never want to hear the word pivot again. I'm sick of pivoting. We've had to pivot so many times and try to figure out how do we regulate? How do we manage our board through all of these things? How do we help to keep our businesses intact, right? Our teams. And we had to do that. But for me in particular, because we've done this amalgamation of these two very large entities, it is now a very personal challenge in terms of how do we how do we bring these businesses and these teams together? How do we create this supersized group that sounded so great in all the press releases, but somebody now has to actually figure out how to do it? You know, how do we manage an increasingly complex regulatory environment? So that one I think I would highlight as a big challenge that I think is common to everyone. With all the uncertainty in the world, what that means is that we are constantly regulating, or regulating. And I would say certainly in the Jamaican context, there have been quite a few changes that have come up in the regulatory landscape recently, and some of them have come a lot faster than we expected and didn't necessarily give, industries, businesses a chance to kind of absorb them, but they're upon us. And our job as corporate secretaries is to help our teams navigate this challenging regulatory environment that we ourselves have to try to understand and keep on top of. So Charissa had raised earlier the importance of retooling. Well, in this constantly evolving environment, we now have to be experts on data protection. We now need to understand AI. And this is after, basically having to come up with a degree in virology and medicine coming out of COVID. So I think we're constantly retooling and trying to understand how best do we prepare our businesses to deal with these things. So I would say changes in the regulatory environment. Certainly in Jamaica, most companies will say to you, this year is a rough year because we've now got to implement the data protection legislation. And that means cataclysmic change for many of us, with very, very serious financial and reputational consequences, as Kathryna had raised earlier. These are things that make or break your business. The corporate secretary's role is to steer you through all of these changes, to make sure you're prepared, make sure that you get buy-in, and make sure we ourselves understand how do we tool our board, how do we tool our management team to manage these things. But quite frankly, keeping on top of the regulatory changes is almost a full-time job, right? Because they come hard and they come fast, and some of them are quite earth-shattering. And every time one comes, everybody says, how will we manage this? But we somehow do. So I would highlight regulatory changes as just a very big area that I think is a challenge to all businesses, right? The other one that I would probably highlight is just, I think businesses are under a lot of pressure more than ever to figure out, how do you keep making money? How do you keep businesses viable? How do you do that, navigating all of these changes? And the ways that you used to make money 50 years ago do not work anymore. So how do you keep on top of these things? And again, while many of us may not have a strictly commercial or financial role, the job of the corporate secretary is to help to pilot the entire board and business through all of these strategic changes. How do you think strategically? How do we poise them so that they can think strategically, looking forward, to make sure that this business that employs so many people and has such an important role, how does it keep abreast and how does it keep making money? Because if it doesn't make money, we don't have jobs. So I think that's a big one. And again, specifically to corporate secretaries in that space, outside of the board, what has happened, I think, to a lot of companies, certainly multinationals, is that you end up with very complex legal structures, with a web of companies and, in different jurisdictions, with different sorts of statuses. And that brings its own regulatory challenges. How do you keep on top of that? How do you manage, this increasingly complex sort of web of companies? And then, I guess I can't help but say, just staying abreast of changes. And the biggest one, I think, that's on everybody's mind is AI. We don't even really understand what this will mean for us. We have lots of theories out there. Some of them are fairly doomsday-esque. Some are much more positive. But whatever it is, I think we all understand that AI will pose very real challenges to the world in which we live, to our business, maybe even to our own jobs. And we have to think about, how do we prepare for that? How do we prepare for this unknown? So I think, I would flag those as the big issues, certainly for me, and echo what my colleagues have said here, that, we are constantly retooling and constantly having to rethink even our own capabilities and capacities. How do we keep on top of all these things? And how do we take our boards and businesses on a journey? Because that's actually our job. We have to take them and help to pilot them and hold hands and walk through this all of these changes and to keep things going. So I'll leave that one back to Simone, and then we can go from there. Sure.
But this is, you know, ladies, you've just been talking for a few minutes and I literally have 5 pages of notes. Yeah. But that being said, I want to thank you all for sharing so candidly, because it raised a lot of questions in my head. And I don't want to go off script too far, but I want to ask you now, you've all echoed sentiments. I mean, you shared certain sentiments and you echoed each other in certain respects and certain regards. So I want to kind of cherry pick. I want to pick on something that I think each of you touched on. And the first thing that I want to kind of pull out of everything else you said was that whole need to, the retooling that Simone just mentioned it again. Everybody talked about this retooling and this need to keep up. How hard has it been for you as an individual? Because the previous panel spoke about the need. I was just looking at the agenda here, where the previous panel was speaking about, you know, the need for corporate secretaries to be, you know, to remain like, you know, up to date on the latest things and to basically maintain that I want to say that competency level, you know, in terms of being on the board, having all these, not necessarily certifications, but experience and information. And there was a discussion in that panel where one presenter was basically saying, well, you know, you can't be expert in everything. And I agree with her. I think Rachel said it. But from what you're saying is you already have to be an expert in everything. You already have to know, you already have to understand how things fit in. And that comes down to the same VUCA, the complexity, that whole complexity question. Like, how hard has it been for you as an individual? And what have you done personally to kind of handle it? And I want to ask Simone for you to start there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, I think the important thing is, again, you're probably not going to be an expert. That's A. And I think the most important thing is understanding what you don't know and when you need to reach out for actual expertise. Now, I think the role for sure requires you to have a working knowledge of all of these things. But the critical thing I would say for both the role of general counsel and corporate secretaries is to know exactly what you don't know. Because when you think you know everything is when you can get yourself in problems. But you do have to be familiar. You do have to have a working knowledge. You do have to be able to show up and speak, you know, sensibly, definitively on these topics. You do be able to steer your board. So I think the important thing is to know for yourself. Of course, there are lots of courses, there are lots of opportunities to learn, but to also know when is it that I need to bring in a team of consultants to actually help to pilot my business through this, you know, and know when that you probably won't be an expert, but you will seek expertise when you need it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Kathryna.
Yeah, so I'll echo what Simone has said as well. I mean, we aren't experts, but we have to have a working knowledge in order to advise our boards and our executives. For some reason, executives look to us as experts as well. So, yeah. So, for me, it has been a matter of keeping abreast of trends in governance in particular, bringing those to the table. And as Simone said, bringing in consultants where necessary. You have to know your limitations. You have to know, because the corporate secretary's job is already so vast that, yes, you need to know when you need help, when you need to provide training, not just for yourself, but for your directors, when to bring a consultant to give a workshop, particularly for me around ESG and bringing ESG and circular economy to the board agenda. That is something that is very topical for us right now. And it's something that we are engaging consultants to help with because we don't have in-house expertise, but we've recognized from a governance perspective that this is key and we need to bring it onto the agenda and keep it there and have a framework and a strategy moving forward. So yeah, those are
Thank you. Chris, you know what's coming to you next.
Yeah, I think I can echo what Simone and Kathryna have said. For me, it's been attending a lot of conferences, workshops, CCGI being one of them, international workshops a lot because in the Dutch Caribbean, we don't have that many local workshops. And to really stay up to date on whatever the board is learning as well, because they're learning as a director, but I need to know as a corporate secretary, what does that mean? Does that impact the agenda? Does that impact the reporting to the agenda? Also staying very close to your functional partners within your organization, the risk management. I'm not the legal counsel, so the legal counsel, compliance, audit, even the external auditor. I think those have really helped with bringing director education on the agenda. And then for me to make sure that I attend a relevant training so I know what to do as a corporate secretary.
Excellent. I want to just draw attention to the chat here. I'm seeing here from Janice. She says AI is here to stay, but there will be certain jobs that they cannot replace. AI does not know about empathy and communication on the human level, and companies are going to have to realize that people make a company successful, not a robot. Yeah, and that was actually, thank you so much, Janice, because I was about to start talking about AI, because each of you spoke about technology. And Lorenzo adds here, it's important to know that you don't know what you do, that you don't know what you don't know. Then that requires humility. And I was going to raise that point when Simone spoke. Thank you, Lorenzo, because it speaks to a level of humility as well, where you just have to say, hey, this is not my spiel. I do not know anything about this. Let's get some help. And Janice, yes, I agree with Kathryna. It boils down to educating the people who have to make the important decisions. And again, humility, because they also have to want to be educated or be open. That openness and that whole championing of the change and all of that. Yes, and she adds here, quite a few companies don't understand about risk management. And that was the third thing I was going to get to. So thank you very much, Janice. So ladies, let's talk about the role of technology. Each of you spoke of it in your own way. And I think technology especially, and I like how, Kathryna, you laid it out very nicely when you spoke about what you all would have had to do to kind of switch gears. And yes, Simone, I use the word pivot. When you were, yeah, she looks like she's triggered. You have some trauma. And, you know, to kind of switch, because I too was working in an environment where during COVID, when it went crazy and I was a new hire, nobody knew what was going on. And that whole engagement, very difficult to maintain because nobody knew what was happening. So for a leadership role that you all would have had to take on in your own institutions, I want to ask you now, I know, Kathryna, you shared about what you all would have done. Did you have any experiences in particular that stays with you with regard to how your board would have dealt with that change? Is it that they were like, okay, no problem, we're switching? Or was there real pushback or, you know, reticence on the part of some person?
I must say I'm very proud of myself because I'm not a millennial. I don't want to reveal my age, but I'm really proud of the fact that I've embraced technology.
Right.
And I have managed to convince the board that this is the way to go. So as Frances said, when she first became a corporate secretary, she introduced a board portal. Right. So there was, yes, it's a paperless system, which is something I also did at Angostura. It was not met with any kind of resistance, I must say, even though the directors are, you know, similar to me, not in the youngest generation, but we have some who are. Please don't. But
it's a safe space.
Generally speaking, I have not been met with resistance with respect to technology. As you spoke about AI, that is also something on our agenda. We were even looking at it in the general counsel sphere. We haven't reached there yet, but it's something that we are looking at. So far, I haven't seen a bot to replace PopSex, thankfully, but we are looking at it in our finance areas and so on, where you have a repetitive task that can be done more efficiently, and then the human resource can be redeployed to do something a little more strategic, a little more value added to the organization. But no, I haven't. The board has been very receptive and very open to the use of technology. Not only during COVID, but just generally. I use it in my general counsel department as well as on the board. Yeah, it has been going good so far, but of course, you have to scenario plan. What if the software servers crash? What do we do? And so we have our contingency plans. I must say COVID did force us into that way of thinking, which I think is a plus, because we become more efficient leaders, taking into account risk management and scenario business continuity planning.
Excellent. I'm impressed. First, I want to hear from you. What was the feedback in your own environment with that whole technology and wasn't what, you know, how did you all handle that in your own scenario?
Similar to Kathryna, we went to the board portal quite a few years back. So they were used to doing something in the technology space. So going to virtual meetings was not bad. During COVID time, we did have more meetings than ever. So that was a little bit different. So how is everybody still engaged? Do the same directors speak? So that's where you have a conversation sometimes with your chair after the meeting, where you can mention, because your chair is chairing the meeting, you can mention that I noticed that in the meeting, it's always the same directors when it's virtual. And that's the conversation she then had behind the scenes with the directors, and you saw that change. So the board went with the virtual meetings. That was not an issue. It is right now, we are navigating the hybrid meetings. So we went back to in-person meetings, and that's what you also want for the engagement, for the team building. But we also have hybrid meetings, and that's what we're navigating right now. What will that mean? Will we have set hybrid meetings per year? How are we navigating that? So that's something we're looking at. But in terms of technology, I've found, regardless of the age, once you have a couple of board members, get on their side, and once they are okay with it, they can also influence the rest of the board. So I haven't had an issue with that. And in terms of AI, I'm of the opinion that it's actually a tool that we can use for administrative duties where possible. And so we can focus more on the value add responsibilities. I really think that we should embrace it within a secure environment. So our cybersecurity department is very involved in anything we would want to do, anything the company would want to do in the AI sphere, but it is here to stay.
Okay, yeah, that's a fact. Simone?
Okay, so I mean, I think my experience is probably quite similar. We had introduced a board portal some years ago. And I mean, I think I'd just like to add, for those who are looking at introducing these sorts of things, it's really important to do proper research into the types of tools because what really makes or will break buy-in to these things is how well these tools actually operate. So my board, I can't say when I first came up with the idea of using a board portal, they were not excited about it because people do like to have paper, and I can understand. I am a lawyer. That large filing cabinet over there, it's full of paper. I can't let go of it. I will not let go of my paper, but I understand. And I think they had a really tough time. But I think, again, really spending the time and energy and the money to make sure that you use a very good, a good board portal or whatever technology that you use actually works effectively. So what my promise to them from the beginning was, you will not miss the paper. It will function in a similar way. And of course, if I'm giving that guarantee or assurance, it means that I need to be pretty sure about how this portal works, how it operates, that kind of thing. So I would say that's the only thing that I had a little bit of a challenge to sell at the beginning. But again, don't skimp, find a good tool. I think what they were most concerned about is that it would be the equivalent of a PDF pack. And for my board, so accustomed to paper, you really do need something to mimic a paper experience where you can take notes. You won't get that from a PDF pack. In terms of just managing through COVID, because we're a multinational group, we are accustomed to a certain amount of online already. We do, so for example, this is fairly unusual, but my CFO is actually located in Wales and travels back and forth because we have businesses there, and he happens to be British and is located there, and he will come back and forth. So we're very accustomed to doing a lot of online meetings already. But again, we had to spend the time to make sure that if we're really going to mainly to online meetings, the technology has to be sound and you don't miss anything. And I'm glad that Charissa raised hybrid, because I think hybrid is way more challenging than online or in person, because you need to make the people online feel like they're a part of the room. So you've got to do your research. You've got to invest in good tools. If you don't invest in good tools, you will not have an effective environment for decisions to be made. What I will say about online, kind of coming out of online back to face, is that you know, I think we had a good system. We, like Charissa, like Kathryna, like many companies, we had an inordinate number of meetings during COVID, as you can well imagine, because there was so much VUCA stuff going on. And we were trying to figure out how do we manage all of these things. And, but I will say that coming out of that, I've been a little bit focused on bringing the board back together, because I do think that there is nothing like face-to-face. So I think, you know, as much as online works and it's effective and it does get the job done, there's nothing quite like face-to-face. That said, the post-COVID world is a hybrid world, back to what Charissa said. So I think it's how do you find that right mix where you do bring people back, because there's nothing quite like bringing people back, or rotating those who are online, you know, to make sure that they're not always online. Sometimes they come in, and I think that's where corporate secretaries play an important role to kind of make sure that we keep that mix, so that because you do lose things. I would say the next kind of frontier is AI. And Charissa, and I agree with her that I think we have to look at it as a tool. I think, you know, similar to other changes in the past, if I kind of sat up there and said, you know what, I'm not giving up my vinyl, I would not have any music to play right now. So I think at some point you do have to embrace it, but you need to be careful, and you need to make sure you see how do you harness the power of this tool. And you know, I've not gotten there yet. You know, I've not kind of cracked into it. A lot of people have suggested to me that it could be a tool for minutes. I don't know, because for me, and I think, you know, other corporate secretaries would agree, minutes take such a tremendous amount of judgment that I simply do not know how any tool could replicate that. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. Well, happy and sad, because then maybe they won't need me anymore. But I do think that so much judgment, and I think, you know, for someone to say, oh, just get an AI tool to take the minutes, is probably somebody who has never had to take minutes before, because they think it's just a matter of taking notes. And I think everybody will understand that it's one of the hardest jobs that you can have, is taking proper minutes, because you really are exercising a tremendous amount of judgment at every step of the way. No sentence is just a sentence. Everything is communicating something. Everything is talking, you know, giving an impression of the people, the way that they take decisions, the way that things are done. And quite frankly, I don't think I speak for myself alone when I say that in taking minutes, you often have to interpret for your board what they actually meant to say, because what they said literally wasn't actually what they meant to communicate. Or if you were to take it verbatim, it would not do justice to the situation. And if AI can do that, I'm happy to engage it at my next board meeting. But I think, you know, there are lots of things where you have to exercise a lot of judgment and a tremendous amount of EQ. And I think that's where we'll have a bit of a challenge. Yes, Kathryna.
Go ahead.
On that point, Simone, that GPT. I think our competition going forward. But no, I think you're right. Minute taking is one of the most difficult tasks that a proper minute taking would have to do. And I also wanted to touch on the point of virtual versus hybrid versus in person. I agree with you, there's nothing like in-person meetings. And to kind of not force, but to ensure that there's, you know, that remains in terms of in-person meetings, we are seeking to have procedures to ensure that there's a certain number of meetings that directors must attend in person. Notwithstanding that we're going to change our bylaws to accommodate virtual meetings, we're going to have procedures to ensure that there's some level of in-person meetings, because there's nothing like in-person interaction. You know?
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? That segues in nicely into some of the comments I'm seeing here. So permit me to read Janice's comment. So she's asking for email addresses. You all will be, Kamla, I will leave that to you, Kamla, to guide. But with regard to these online technology, she mentioned soft skills becoming more important, because speaking on email, of course, is different to speaking face-to-face. And it's correct. And I think it basically touches on things that you all have shared in terms of knowing and using your discretion. And Simone spoke about that quite a bit in terms of using your discretion when you're taking your notes. Because like you said, what they said is not what they meant to communicate. And that's a human interpretation and understanding, nuances of communication and body language and all of that too have to be taken into consideration. So very good point. And then this is a very provocative question here. I have my own provocative question, but I'll definitely take this one first. So This is from Derek Lockhart. He says, given the types of challenges with typical boards, should there not be an infusion of younger directors who have more of a stake in a sustainable future? Would this enable boards to move beyond these rudimentary issues to much more challenging ones? Ladies, what do you think?
Yeah, younger
Silence
directors.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, in our case, actually, that's part of our skills matrix. Age is part of the matrix. So
and
now,
what age? Like, could you break it down for me a bit more?
Different ages. A diversity of skills, diversity of background, gender, obviously, but age is part of that diversity right now. And the other one is also IT and cybersecurity. That's a big one to have in your board. But a lot of times, if you want a cybersecurity or an IT specialist, you're going to get a younger person, right? That sometimes makes sense. So age is for us part of the skills matrix. And I think that's a good way to put it on. It's more of a formal document instead of just talking about it. So every time there's a vacancy a year ahead, you would know in terms of retirement, if you would know, sometimes you don't. And you develop a pool of candidates, and part of the diversity is age. And yes, I do think it helps.
Wow. And I'm just reading Lorenzo's comments here. He speaks about two perspectives of an AI, saying consider it as a human augmentation instead of a human replacement. That's an excellent point. So a tool, see it like a car. I love this analogy. Thank you, Lorenzo. A car is inherently a good tool, but without a licensed sober driver, road regulations, and appropriate enforcement, a car in the wrong hands becomes a threat to society. That's why I need a license, because basically it's a deadly machine, right? AI is a new tech needing appropriate guardrails. We have to invest in understanding it more than fearing it. And Janice says she is agreed, but we should not make a difficult task to understand AI. Very good points, because I think it's something that we all are contemplating. Like, I played with it. I downloaded ChatGPT, and there's a free you had a free thing, and I made it do a policy document or something, just out of the blue, and it did one. Now I'm certain some of the attorneys in the room and persons who are interested in AI would have known about the case in America where the attorney would have used ChatGPT to do their submissions, and it came up with bogus cases. So they call this hallucination. It created the cases it needed for its case, and then the individual submitted it. I have so many comments I can make on that, but again, that's part of the danger, because sometimes an over-reliance, without that regulation and some of the guardrails, as our colleague put it, it might go too far. Again, human beings have to manage the entire system. But I want to go back to something you all said earlier, and this is my provocative question. I know I wrote mine right. So Kathryna, you spoke about business continuity and a shifting in focus. And I believe, Professor, you also mentioned something along those lines. And Simone, of course, you spoke about it. How do you all feel as CorpSecs that you are being called upon? Or is it something that you always did, being involved in that kind of business side, or being called upon to become more involved in the business side, or contemplating those kinds of considerations in your day-to-day tasks? Because like I said before, maybe long time, all you have to do is sit in a corner and take notes and minutes. And now the role has kind of morphed and evolved into something much bigger, So in your own experience and people other colleagues in the field, have they felt hard put upon by being called upon to do this sort of work, or being, in the field? Also, that did they say, look, this is just, part of the course, let's go? Perspectives?
I mean, if I can go ahead. I mean, I think for me, it's an exciting challenge. I mean, I do think that it is a role that you are better at it the more context that you have. Even a simple thing, and again, I'm using the word simple very loosely because it is not simple, but a simple or seemingly simple activity like taking minutes, you simply cannot exercise judgment and discretion if you do not understand what is being said and understand it intimately. If you are hearing it versus understanding it, that will really affect just the way that you record and document how decisions were taken in that. So to me, I don't see it as an area of tension. I do think what I see it as an area of opportunity. It's an opportunity for that businesses are actually understanding that this is a role that needs to touch and concern everything. Now, the challenge, of course, is again, how do you do it all? How do you find time to do it all? And also importantly, you also have to make sure that you remember your regulatory role, Because if you drink too much from the Kool-Aid, you will not be able to see from the outside that something is wrong. So you have to manage somehow to, keep in focus the fact that you're bridging the space between the business and the regulatory. So and if you don't do that, you're not able to exercise your role as, the conscience, as the backstop, if you're too ingrained in what's going on. So I would highlight that, I think, as the watch out. You have to be a little careful. But I do think that that's exactly what a corporate secretary should be doing, understanding the nature of the business. Because if you don't do that, you can't exercise your role properly. You can't guide your board, you can't guide your management team, and you can't, importantly, save them from themselves when they need to be saved.
Thank you. Carissa, you have anything to add?
Fully agree. It's a challenge. It's exciting. It's an opportunity, and it's part of knowing your business, part of knowing your industry, and it can be of a lot of added value, not only for you but for the board as well. Fully agree.
Okay, Kathryna.
No, I agree with the other panelists, of course. Business continuity planning falls under risk. We have a department dedicated to it. However, each department will contribute. So, I feel a little proud that we're being called upon in the corporate secretariat to do our risk and planning and so on and contribute that to the overall plan. And as Simone said, it's an exciting time because it was not necessarily part of our job before, but now in a VUCA world, it certainly is. And I'm happy to embrace that challenge and be part of the whole business continuity planning.
Thank you. So we've been talking about I'm going back to VUCA, because I know we've been talking about some of the challenges you all would have faced in individual experiences. And I want to go back to each of the letters and what they mean. So in terms of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, I know we spoke about, in my interpretation, a lot of the complexities that were involved in what you all were doing, and we covered everything in terms of the uncertainty and ambiguity. But to me, I want to find out, in your opinion, in terms of your own experience, what was the most volatile time for you? Like what would you consider to be the most volatile thing you had to deal with over the past 3 to 4 years? Will it be 3 years? This year's 3 years, 2020 to now? Yeah. So what do you think would have been like made you say, well, what is this? This is gone crazy, that is it. Now I know somebody shared about that merging of those 2 mega companies. When did that happen? This year, or that happened during the pandemic?
That happened between the end of last year into this year.
Yikes.
So it's literally just happened. Right?
Wow.
Following COVID, as if things were not already stressful enough. Yes.
Wow. So I'll leave you alone then. So what was the most volatile thing that you had to deal with over the past few years?
I mean, it must have been the pandemic. Yeah, I think for all of us, it must have been the pandemic, what it all meant to us as a company, and what we needed to go through and the things we needed to change. I mean, it literally defined all of the volatility. There was the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity, all part of it. Very challenging, but 3 years later, are we better for it? Yes, I think so. I think we've become more adaptable. We've become more flexible. And so it ultimately, and that's, I think, part of what I said, it's so important that we remain adaptable, we remain in a continuous learning environment, develop ourselves, and that the COVID just highlighted that. And with AI, that's another one. That's a big one that I am very excited about to use as a tool. We're not there yet because we need to make sure everything we use is secure. So it won't be a ChatGPT for the company, at least. It will have to be a secure tool. But that's the next one where I think, again, all of those, the VUCA elements are there. How do we navigate that? By staying adaptable, flexible, learning, and improving.
Okay. So I'm going to change. Let me switch the question then for Kathryna, for you. I'm going to switch the question. So what is the, I like how Chris is very positive, your perspective. So I'm going to use your words, right? What is the biggest opportunity you see coming out of this now, based on what you would have experienced over the past few years? Biggest one.
lots of opportunities, coming out of the pandemic and coming out of operating in a VUCA world. I mean, just use of technology is one. So we become more efficient. We engage with our stakeholders in a very easy way now. Whereas before, you had to wait for documents to go through the postal system to tell a shareholder you're going to have an annual meeting on a certain date. Now it's instant. Opportunities for coaching and mentoring, not even if you are not able to meet physically, you can use your tools. I had coaching sessions virtually, mentoring of team members and so on, because it was a difficult time. The pandemic was a difficult time emotionally for a lot of employees. So that was an opportunity to reach out and to communicate in a novel way and an effective way as well. Opportunities for, as I said, business continuity planning, risk management at the corporate secretarial level, which we now have embedded in our department and which creates efficiencies. So, there's opportunity and disruption, and we really embrace those opportunities arising out of what could be perceived as negative circumstances in the VUCA environment.
Thank you. And I want to point out now, Kathryna, you shared something when you were speaking, and I put the link I put in the chat is actually an article that references what you spoke about with Johansson, sorry. Yeah. And I want us to just look at that briefly here. So Kathryna took us to school. Yeah. Right. So we have VUCA school. So we have basically the antidote to VUCA is what this article says, right? So it's vision, understanding, clarity, and agility, right? And based on what you all just said, do you think, I mean, I'm putting you on the spot because this is something that we did not get the opportunity to deal with before. But the agility we've spoken about, I know the agility is something that is relevant. The clarity and the vision, do you all think that in your I know you all talk about piloting and having that kind of role that you play in the organization as a CorpSec, as a general counsel, but do you think that whole point that they're making about clarity, and it says here, complexity can be countered with clarity, the deliberative process to make sense of the chaos. In a VUCA world, chaos comes swift and hard. Simone, you said something akin to that. Leaders who can quickly and clearly tune into all the minutiae associated with the chaos can make better, more informed business decisions. Do you all think you have somebody says, see no lies here. So do you all think, is it fair for me to say, therefore, that the CorpSec is the best placed person or the individual in the board who can achieve that clarity on behalf of the board and then assist the rest of the board members in getting it? I don't know if that's a fair question. What do you think? Do you think you are the CorpSec, the general counsel, as let me say the CorpSec, is the best placed individual on the board to help achieve that clarity?
If I can, from my perspective, I don't know if it's clarity and vision would be. Understanding and agility, yes.
Okay.
In terms of the 4 factors, but the clarity and vision, maybe in collaboration with the chair and management, and definitely vision and clarity can come, but it's more the understanding and agility. That's the one I relate to the most.
Okay, cool. Kathryna, which ones do you resonate with you?
Yeah, I think you raised uncertainty and understanding. Simone? Yeah, that one as well resonates with me in terms of the CorpSec being best placed. I mean, CorpSec sits in a unique position in that I think we're seen as the objective ones. We sit between the board and management. We're not on the side of the board, we're not on the side of management, we're on the side of good governance. So we are the correct partner, executive in the organization to influence the board towards greater clarity, greater understanding, to influence where we need to be more agile, etc. Because a good corporate secretary is relied upon by the chairman and board for guidance on everything, and more so in a VUCA world where things are new to everyone, and we are expected to be, we're expected to know everything. not everything as experts, but at least to have a working knowledge, as we said earlier, of very complex issues and topics. So I think we're best placed to kind of influence or at least get the topic going or steer the relevant executives or directors in the right direction to achieve that clarity and understanding that we need to counter difficult circumstances.
Okay, thank you. And Simone?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with both my colleagues on this one. I do think that, you know, certainly a good corporate secretary ought to be able to help to navigate all of these things, and certainly to be a partner to management, a partner to the board in doing that, right? Because I'm going to introduce another word, which is strategic, because I do think that the role of corporate secretary is a very strategic role. May not have been traditionally seen that way, but I do think that in helping the business to achieve clarity, you know, all of these desirable things, the way that the corporate secretary manages their role, provided it's done in a strategic way, will help to steer that entire process along. And when I should say strategic, I mean that everything is strategic, down to an agenda. It's a very strategic document. It's a document that you use to steer, guide, and pilot the board. And I think we need to see our roles as such, right? I know it's not traditionally seen that way. That's really more for the portfolio of the CEO or the chief strategy officer, but it's a very strategic role in my view. So I think a good corporate secretary is the best placed partner. I won't say a corp sec is responsible for that on their own, but certainly to partner with the board, with management, to get to some of these more comfortable spaces like clarity, like, you know, where there's no longer ambiguity, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I would say that, you know, I think if you happen to have on top of that legal training, and this is obviously not the only place that you can get this ability, but you will be fairly accustomed to navigating lots of complex information and distilling it down and to make it quite simple. And I think that's a very important tool that you can use to help to achieve some of these desirable outcomes. Again, it's not unique to just lawyers. I'm only speaking from my own perspective, because I know that's what a key component of what you do learn at law school is to analyze very quickly, distill down into key points of information, to quickly parse what things are important. And that's a very critical skill that you apply to the role to help to achieve these outcomes. So, yeah,
definitely. So I'm going to just, I know we're running out of time. We have a few, we have a few minutes yet.
Yes.
Sorry, Kamala. I'm going to go to you.
Yes, thanks. No, I wanted to also let persons know that as we entered into the last half hour here, especially if anyone wanted to raise their hand and be a part of the conversation, that would really be good. But there was something that Simone said when she started off this whole conversation that really tickled me. And I saw Melanie commented on it very early in the panel as well. And she was saying that when she got to understand what VUCA was about, you know, she was thinking to herself, does this describe the role of the secretary, you know, or the state of the world in general? Because the world of the corporate secretary is itself so volatile and complex and all of that. So I was wondering, because we do have quite a number of corporate secretaries here attending today's session, if there are other persons who feel that way as well. Or are they now beginning to feel that way after listening today? So,
and can we start a support group?
We said the same thing last year, you know. I didn't do it.
I know. I'm promising we are going to do it. I already have someone, because I have to delegate that responsibility. I can't do it all myself. That was the challenge. Yeah, so I've already identified someone that would be your responsibility. So we will make sure that we get our group going and probably meet together. But I would love to hear from some of the other corporate secretaries here as we come to the end of today's focus on you. Did you already feel, as Simone was saying, that your world is a VUCA world already? Or having listened to all the things that Rachel and Ermat and this morning's panel, they said, do you now feel that where you were safe before, that you're now exposed to what has to be an extremely difficult and challenging world? Anyone wants to share with us?
Someone in the chat is saying she can't raise her hand. Is it Janice? Sorry.
Yes.
I just noticed it.
So that, yeah, just
my Zoom does not allow me to raise my hand. I am new to being a corporate secretary. I'm not a lawyer. But my boss expects me to perform certain corporate secretary functions, which I am looking forward to because I'm always one who will do research and find out what is required and so on. That's why I was asking whether it was possible that any of the presenters could share their emails, because, for me to be able to tap into your knowledge and experience would work wonders for me. Now, I personally have found this session today very enlightening. I have learned a lot. I will say that I probably will not have the opportunity in my role to experience some of what you all have talked about here today. But it has certainly given me the knowledge that I can perhaps share with my boss to see whether he would be willing to, explore some of the information that you all have provided. So I want to thank you all for your information. And I do look forward to the next session whenever you will come again as presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. And we have Janelle, and I think Janelle is joining us from St. Lucia at the moment. So
yes,
yeah.
I am. So hearing this last session, and ladies, you all are preaching to the choir, preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm literally hearing my job. Been a corporate secretary over the last few years, but more so an attorney for the bank in the financial sector for over 20 years. And, the role has become more and more complex. And yes, you have to become literally like an expert in everything. Of course, your area of specialization is governance and law. But then when you're in meetings, you're also discussing ethical concerns, you're discussing strategic type decisions in terms of brand and reputation, and you become a marketing specialist, you become all kinds of things in the boardroom, and of course in the organization when discussing with your colleagues and so your role becomes more and more complex. And I guess having the experience of many years as a professional, whether you're a lawyer or whatever, the more experience you are, you're best able to navigate as well some of the uncertainties as the theme today, uncertainties and the complexities. And then having a network of advisors and colleagues you can call on. So Janice, your point of getting emails and numbers, girl, you're on the right track, right? You're on the right track. We don't know it all. But having these forums, having these discussions, you network and you get to meet persons in similar capacities, but different kinds of experiences. So when you are navigating what we call uncertainties, new things to you, it may not be new to somebody else. Yeah, so having that network really helps. So I want to echo all the sentiments shared. This session was very valuable to me. I felt as if I'm no longer a lonely bird. There are others like me feeling as if, oh my God, when will this ever end? But I guess the word of the day is uncertainty, or what VUCA is now the norm. It's now the norm. We have to now become comfortable being uncomfortable. So thank you very much, ladies. Excellent discussion and presentations. And also thank you to the CCGI for a really, really great forum this afternoon.
Thank you, Janelle. And yes, I knew of the word VUCA because, of course, that's my environment as well, that I need to understand. And I wanted to bring it here because I did really feel that as the governance professional in the boardroom, you more than any other director, because the directors change. They have a tenure, they come and go. So a lot of the responsibility of the institutional memory of the organization resides with you. A lot of the guidance of what you have to place before your board resides with you. And then, just as you shared, you have to understand the implications of some of the decisions that directors are making. And I think one of the panels earlier spoke about that all documents that go from the management team to the board needs to pass through you. You need to read it but also understand it, because you need to advise the board if there are implications to compliance, if there are implications in other ways for that board. So I saw that this is your world. So Simone, I was so glad that you actually identified it and you started with that this is really what corporate secretaries are about. So we really need to lift your profile. People need to understand really and truly the quantity and quality of work that the corporate secretaries do in order that we have excellent corporate governance. So I saw Lorenzo sent a group hug to everyone. Yes, it's needed. And I did hear, I mean, the very first time we held our corporate secretaries forum, I think it was from Grace Kennedy, Gail Moss Solomon. She did point out to us then that sometimes a corporate secretary can feel very much alone because you carry a very heavy weight. There's so much confidential information which you need to keep. And then how then do you seek advice? How do you seek support and that kind of thing? So she told us in that one session that she was so happy to actually now meet other corporate secretaries so that you could feel that sense of connection and know that you are not alone. So we have been exploring what may be the best way to bring everyone together. But my major concern too is that we do need to ensure that people's confidentiality is respected, that information that you may want to reach out within the group and ask things, that it's so important that must be respected and it not leave the group. And that's why I didn't want to hasten into that, knowing that there may be a lot of implications for us because we build an environment where persons do feel that it's safe to be open and to be candid and to share. And we want to nurture that. So that's just one of the things that we're going to have to make sure that we manage well. So that was my 2 cents in there. We do still have a few minutes. If there was anyone who wanted to add anything else. I know we have some persons who are not corporate secretaries as well, but if there are. All right, so but just then to stay on that point, does anyone have any preference in terms of how we can be connected? Because my thoughts, so I'll just share this with you. My thoughts are initially we can create a WhatsApp group now, but we'll have to have a strong administrator who will manage the group and look at all comments to make sure that there's nothing that could, and to manage who is in the group too, to make sure people respect that. And I think it's necessary, although we are around the Caribbean region, but it may be necessary once or twice for the year for us to have a physical session where you could get together and you can talk to each other and you can seek that solace and comfort. So those are my initial thoughts in terms of the direction we will go in developing this networking group for corporate secretaries. But I'm happy to hear anything from anyone. And if Janelle is still with us, I know she's driving, so Janelle, only if it is safe for you to speak, it would be nice to also know, because you're out in St. Lucia, this has been my concern, to not let anyone feel left out.
Oh yes, I want to be included. I'm driving, but yes, I want to be included. I want to be included, definitely. Having the in-person sessions would require some sort of logistical, planning, but definitely want to be part of the group. Yes, certainly.
Okay, great. And we have a suggestion from Lorenzo that we can create a closed group on LinkedIn, because the platform will allow for idea sharing and discussion. And that might actually be even better than the WhatsApp group, because it means you don't have a lot of stuff that's going to fill up your phone as well. So yes, thank you very much And Melanie, yes, thank you for sharing that you will participate in the group with whatever format, you know. And certainly for all the new corporate secretaries, we do run corporate secretary training. Faye is an excellent facilitator, I will tell you. And those of you who have attended her programs here at CCGI will attest to that as well. We do both the role and function of corporate secretary, and then she does do a second workshop that delves into writing minutes and drafting board resolutions and that kind of thing. So, there's a lot that persons can refresh themselves with, or if you're new to the position, that you can learn from her. And you want to be able to get that before you approach anyone to ask them for advice and guidance, because as you can see, this is a lot of work and it spans a very wide area. So it helps for you to be able to get some of those basics in some training. Okay, so it's 6:24. Simone, maybe you could just take wrap-up statements from each of your panelists now, and we'll close for today.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to ask Simone to give us, everybody gets a minute and a half to say their closing statements about their perspectives on this topic. So Simone?
Well, again, I mean, I think it's been just a great discussion for me, because it's a great platform. It's a great opportunity to hear from other corporate secretaries. I'm sorry that it is not in person, because I'm dying to ask Kathryna about that situation with the board and whatever. But it's always such a good opportunity to get the perspective of others, because you're quite right. We're not alone. You know, a lot of people are facing these things. It is a job that by its very nature has a lot of complexity and volatility and ambiguity. And we are required to be able to kind of ride all of these waves of change and disruption. So I think again, just to echo the sentiments of my colleagues on this, I think it's important to make sure that you stay abreast of all these changes. It's very important to have a network of people who you can talk to, who you can refer things to. It's very important to be aware of what you know and what you don't know. When do you get help? When is it time for you to think about expanding the size of your department to the extent that you can? Do you need others? Do you need support? It's very, very important, because we're being called on to do more and more, which I think is great in many ways, but we have to be realistic about what we can do. But there's no question to me that the role is pretty much the backbone of any business. And I think once we recognize that, we need to do what we need to do to make sure that we're properly tooled and we're properly prepared to handle it as best as we can. And I'm looking forward to the LinkedIn group. I think it's a great suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Kathryna?
All right, I get to go in the same order as I started. Okay. No, I echo Simone's sentiments about the support group needed. The corporate secretary's life is a lonely life. Many times when I'm the last person leaving my admin building, I'm reminded. And maybe our COO, he would see me and he'd say, my father was a corp sec and he always said it was a lonely life. Yes, he's like, now I see he was not lying. So I think, Kamala, it would be greatly appreciated if we have in-person networking Caribbean events as well. Of course, kudos to you and the CCGI team for these sessions. They are invaluable, and as you can tell, we need them as CorpSecs. On the topic at hand today, excellent panel discussion. There's tremendous opportunity in disruption. That's my takeaway from this. And I'm excited to move from VUCA to VUCA Prime. Sorry to use the term again, but I just really like it because it can bring forth the best leadership qualities in us and help us to navigate, the future without fear. It really equips us for a VUCA world. As CorpSecs, we must continue to show strategic vision, emotional intelligence, empathy, good communication skills, influencing and forging relationships, the ability to show innovation, to be agile and to be adaptable. So yeah, those are my closing remarks. And a pleasure to be here with you all, and hope to see you next year.
Thank you so much. And Charissa?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to share and to learn from my fellow panelists what VUCA means to us as corporate secretaries. And I just want to reiterate the importance of thinking strategically, being proactive, and staying ahead of the curve. Thank you, Kamla, for organizing such an engaging session and giving you 2 minutes back. Thank you.